the magnitude of the massacre and all that was happened is something that we are still experiencing. It's just like a very, very long October 7th, even today.
Wir haben heute hier im CBN-Büro in Hamburg Besuch aus Israel. Dan Carlson, der nationale Direktor aus Jerusalem, ist hier und wir sind sehr dankbar, dass er bereit ist, Fragen zu beantworten, wie es gerade in seinem Land, in Israel, aussieht. So happy to have you here.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Now you are in a war situation since more than 100 days. What do you say? How is the situation? How is the atmosphere in Israel currently?
Well, it's complicated, just like every war. There is a lot of sadness with regards to the war. The war is very close, and so we all feel its effects all the time. Everything you do in Israel is connected somehow to the war. There's disappointment with the government. There's also a feeling like we've tried this, we've tried that, nothing seems to work. And I think even a question of where do we go from here? Many Israelis, maybe in the time after the war, are going to be saying, okay, what is the solution long term? And I don't think that we've come to those conclusions yet.
Mm-hmm. The people in your country are facing a lot of cruel situations. How traumatized are they?
I think the trauma is definitely great. They have definitely said that this has been the worst event in Israel's history, and especially since the days of the Holocaust. And it's been a very terrible time. It's not just, we're used to the idea of conflicts where for 10 days, 2 weeks, there's fighting and all that, and then it calms down and people kind of go back to their normal lives. But this is a different war. Now it's already getting close to 4 months of constant conflict. There's not really an end in sight because the solution is not disengagement. The Israeli people recognize that disengagement was a failure because there's an ideology that is a murderous ideology that wants to annihilate them, whether they're connected or not. The magnitude of the massacre and all that was happened is something that we are still experiencing. It's just like a very, very long October 7th, even today.
You're the National Director of CBN in Israel. What is CBN doing to help the people?
Well, that's been adjusted as well with the war. Like the first part of the war, the first thing was evacuated people. The main need, and even before the government kind of realized what was going on and kind of got into gear and provided for shelter and food, and I mean some of the basic needs evacuated. You still have an enormous number of Israelis that have now been living in hotel rooms, sometimes 4 or 5 members of a family in one hotel room for now almost 4 months. And the projection isn't going back to normal anytime soon. For some of these families, they're talking about the end of 2024 that they will still not be able to return to their homes. For CBN Israel, we've adjusted our aid, whether it's providing for shelter or food, but now also how do you strengthen communities? How do you strengthen families that have been had these traumatic events? Providing aid to those people as we go is just an ongoing, because there's always more. Nothing's gotten back really to normal. So there's always like coming from different angles. There's also restoring community, the sense of community. How do you do events that allow people to interact with each other in a healthy way that brings restoration, counseling for post-traumatic stress disorder, things like that, where people can start to process on an emotional level the things that happen, and how do you now find a path forward as a person. So that's the majority of what CBN Israel has been trying to help with.
How do you personally deal with all the challenges you're facing?
The first 2 months of the war, I just tried to not sink into depression. So you just run and do all the time. You try not to even sleep until you're dead tired, and then you go to sleep, you wake up after a few hours, you get up and you start running again, so that you don't have to think about what might catch up with you. I'm not a psychologist or anything, but that's probably not the best way to deal with things. It's the way I've dealt with things. And I think that many of us are dealing with things in a similar way. Like, you're still in the middle of it. You can't. You don't have the luxury of time to mourn and to, sit down and process. You're still in the event. So, anyway, that's kind of where we're at, and I don't think I'm alone in that.
I read on your homepage the prayer requests, where you ask people to pray for you. You wrote there that we should pray for the Palestinians.
In CBN Israel, we do humanitarian projects among the Palestinian people. We feel that God's love is not limited to us or people that are like us. It's limited to everybody. And therefore, the mercy of God is extended to people no matter what nation they're from. We know that in the end, around the throne of grace, there will be people from every kindred, tribe, tongue, and nation. And if that's the case, then it's our duty before the Lord to provide outreach opportunities of grace, to extend that grace to those who are of every tribe, community, and language that are part of the Israeli location, like our population.
Maybe we can open up this spiritual view a little. How do you see this situation you're facing at the moment since October the 7th from your spiritual view?
Look, I think the human history, if you zoom out and you see human history is riddled with terrible events and terrible things. The Jewish people have gone through a tremendous amount of suffering. And so when I look at what's going on, in essence, it's not new. Humans may have developed in the areas of technology, they haven't developed in areas of the transformation of the heart, which is what God needs to transform for us not to be what we are, which is fallen human beings. And in order for His purposes to be fulfilled, we have to be on board with Him, and we have to change our view of things. And so what is God doing on a national basis in Israel? We know that God is still God. In spite of things that we don't understand and struggles that we go through, God is still sovereign. His throne is not shaken by the things that shake us. And sometimes the things that shake us cause us to look for something that is more stable. And if we find Him in that process, then that's a solid foundation we can build on.
What do you hope for the German people? What could we do for you, especially as Christians?
I really did. I think it also was appreciated in Israel to see that the German government made a decision to stand with Israel in The Hague to defend her right to defend herself in this war. This is a war of defense that Israel did not choose. It was a complete surprise and shock to many and most Israelis. And for the fact that the German government recognizes that this is a legitimate war of defense and that Israel is not a conquest imperialistic state, that they want to live in peace, and that the Germans recognize that, I think warms the heart of Israelis specifically. So that's really obviously something that especially coming from Germany, is, I think, a touching scene for the Israelis, that Germany chose to stand where other nations did not. A lot of nations had the opportunity to be able to make that stand against this liable distortion that South Africa brought in the international court against the Israeli nation and the Jewish people specifically. The Jewish people are probably more sensitive to the issue of genocide more than any other nation in the world. And for South Africa to accuse Israel of genocide is a horrendous lie and liable. And Israel often feels like it stands alone. And for Germany to specifically stand with Israel on that, I think, was a very important step for the Israelis to see that someone stood with them.
Thank you, Dan. And we wish you a lot of strength, a lot of hope.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Vielen Dank, dass auch Sie sich Zeit genommen haben, diesen Ausführungen von Dan zuzuhören. Vielen Dank auch, wenn Sie bereit sind zu spenden für die vielen Projekte, die in Israel gerade sehr, sehr notwendig sind.
Wollen auch Sie ein Segensbringer sein? Dann werden Sie Partner von CBN. Lassen Sie uns zusammen die Welt verändern.